Well, hello everybody. It is 4 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Mountain, and I still don't know what time it is at Kirsten's house, but it is time for Healthy You, What's Your Path? And our focus today was going to be about healthy mind, and we are going to have Dennis Deuce on the show to talk about his Rubik's Cube experience. But Dennis had a bit of an emergency this morning, so we are blessed with George E. Green coming on and sharing his mindful experience with us. I've been working with George for quite a few months now. Has it been 2 months? It's been a while. And really, I made a comment the other day. He's teaching me how to breathe. And what he's really teaching me how to do is take my breath and pull it into my whole body, to open up my heart and my mind and my soul and realign. And it's been an amazing experience. I'm still very young on this journey, but today we are going to see and listen to his backstory on how he became this mindful, aware, present man. And I can't wait to get into his story, but let's welcome Kirsten, our wingman, first, and let her say hi to us all the way over from the UK.
Hi everyone, I'm really excited to hear George's story. It's going to be a fascinating discussion, so yeah, hold your seats and join in the fun.
Very good. And George, you know, I don't know why I never asked how you were, who you were, where you started when we first started working together, because I was so overwhelmingly impressed with the energy that I could feel coming across the first HOA we had, the resonance of your voice, just the calmness that you elude, really made me want to be a part of what you were doing and learning your space. So tell us a little bit how you started on your mindful present journey.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to step in today. And of course, there are no accidents, so I suppose I woke up to be here this morning before I got the news. We've heard the meme of "be here now." You know, it's the power of now. It echoes through decade after decade from the 50s, and quite literally, if you go back to the origins of the New Thought community, back to the early 1900s even. Beyond the bumper stickerism of mindfulness or presence, what some Buddhists call mindfulness. There's the actual depth and practice of living in and breathing in and operating from the moment. And so let's just say that my origin story today and our exploration is exactly that. It's an exploration not just for us three, but for anyone who's watching live today or the replay, an exploration into the depth of our own mindful presence. Dan Millman quoted from A Peaceful Warrior, said, "There are no ordinary moments." But the reality is we're steeped in a culture that is steeped in distraction and crisis and competition and chaos. And how that reflects on our inner is that largely on our unconscious narratives are either in argument or direct opposition to our desires and our highest dreams and goals. So our exploration is how do we cut through the veil of confusion, of our familiarity with sort of sleepwalking through our day. How that started with me was early on. My father was very empathic. He was a keen observer, but part of being mindful is being aware of our presence in the world and not making waves. And so my father was very inauspicious in that respect, but also he could see more than most of us, and he could feel and understand more because he paid attention. And in the beginning chapter of the book I'm writing, the first story I tell was we were walking down an aisle in Sears, and I was drifting into oncoming traffic because everything looked shiny to me, of course, as a very young boy. And suddenly I felt my father's hand on my shoulder, gently drawing me back into our side. And as I felt that, I looked up and saw a couple walking by, and I smiled at them. They smiled at me and my father. And my father pulled me aside in a very encouraging way and said, "Son, pay attention. See where you are and see where you're going." And, you know, it's so rare because, you know, often we see parents trying to parent from a place of exhaustion or frustration. And that was how my father operated. He, rather than be in judgment, and that's very key to mindfulness, rather than be in judgment, he was just aware, and he invited others, specifically me, to be aware of myself and where I'm going and of my environment. So those words, that encouragement echoes even now through through my brain and my memory and my emotional life. Fast forward to my late teens, early 20s, I was exploring my Native American heritage, and most of that was through book learning. And after writing about those experiences of learning through books, I made a decision that I needed experience. And you know, of course, be careful what you ask for, because 2 weeks later I was in my first traditional Lakota prayer ceremony, pipe ceremony, and 2 weeks after that it was in my first sweat lodge, which was actually the last sweat lodge before this group of people went to South Dakota for Sundance. So my introduction to that way of praying and that way of being on purpose and in service was an introduction to fire. My training through my Lakota teacher, I and a handful of other people went through a year-long training called warrior training, which had nothing to do with war or aggression. We were trained to be intercessors for peace. We were trained to be people who served and acted as security around some of the highest Lakota ceremonies. And again, if you were to boil that down to one question, is why am I here? My teacher would often remind us, ask yourself, why are you here? Are you here to serve? Or are you here to bring your baggage into this ceremony and chase your own tail? And so the invitation was always, leave your stuff at the gate. Come here, remember who you are and why you're here, to be in service. And quite often, by the time the weekend is over or the ceremony is over, when you go back to the gate, your bags aren't there anymore.
Well, that was one question I was going to ask you at this point, your story. You know, we talked in the green room about Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle, there's tomato, but and his practice of teaching us to let go, of to sit in presence in the power of now and sit in the moment and be aware. And was just talking to a friend of mine about the letting go process, and he describes it as if you were holding hot coal, you would let it go. If you touched a hot fire, you would pull your arm back. To do this with what is inside us, with our thoughts and our inner, to just let it go as if you were holding a piece of hot coal. And then, of course, her and I went into the whole mentorship of that process and how that actually happens. But at this stage, you're a middle teen, and to go into that kind of ceremony, did you have any idea it was going to pull you into that presence?
Oh, yeah. First of all, it was actually early 20s.
Oh, okay.
started, that was after I had moved to Texas. It was living in Houston. I thankfully inherited my father's empathy and hopefully his commitment to being present to the beauty and humanity of everyone. So I had an innate sense of adventure, and that what I was being drawn into and what I was stepping into consciously was an adventure and exercise in a depth of knowing myself. And to add some dimension and texture to what you had shared around the idea of letting go as a process, as described, holding on to a hot coal and letting go of that hot coal, that's as much a reaction as it is taking conscious action. So the fine distinction here is, we talked about that in our sessions, is there's a great difference between being and being mindful and being in our breath and doing. And we're so addicted and attached to doing that we're invested in there being a doing process of letting go. When the reality is, and we will go into the depth of this over and over and over, as I define our practice in your training, it's a practice and a training, a learning that we'll engage in until we take our dirt nap, until we're done with this life and this body. So I'm exploring that with you. The exploration is being in our breath is an exercise in taking in and enriching ourselves and automatically releasing and liberating. Take a deep breath right now, everybody. I just invite you to all take a deep breath in and then relax and breathe out. And now do that again. Breathe in, feel the enrichment of breath, breathe out. Now you do that around 21,900 times a day. That's my lystexia kicking in there. 21,000, almost 22,000 times a day, we breathe in, and then we surrender. Now, how much of the doing is that involved, or how much of that is our being? We are essentially living, breathing, laughing, loving beings, and my mindfulness training is about how to harness something that's automatic and bring it into our consciousness and harness the literal power of conscious enrichment and taking in through the lens of mindfulness and presence, and then simply allowing our body to do what it already knows how to do, which is to release and surrender. Not only our breath, but that moment that just passed.
Now,
when we're stuck in the do. Go ahead.
I was going to say, did you, from early 20s in your first experience with Warrior, and I hope, like you said, everybody out there understands that Warrior training is not what they think it is, but from your experience to now, did you go out of that first training understanding these lessons?
No, I never went out of that training. I'm still in it.
Okay.
Yeah. So this essentially, and this is, this is a very important point. Out of all the people who came and went through that year, there were 4 core participants in warrior training. 2 men and 2 women. I'm talking about balance. Myself and another male friend and 2 women. People came and went because it was an open training. Very few people did the training have such a depth of impact than us 4. And I say I'm still in the training because our ability to be present and in our bodies and to cultivate what in our trainings, Tracy, I talk about our inner alignment assignments, is a practice we'll engage in throughout our entire lives. The reality is, I'm going to throw out some numbers here that are amazing. Some of those they estimated, scientists or whatever, that we have between 65,000 and 70,000 thoughts per day. Mm-hmm. Those people also determined that on average most of us are only fully present, awake, aware, and on purpose 3 to 7% of our lives. Mm-hmm. So that means out of 70,000 thoughts, maybe around 2,100 of those, if we're lucky, are focused and on purpose. The rest of the time, the rest of our waking lives, as much as 97% of our waking life, we are being animated, driven by, and ruled by our unconscious thoughts. And they are largely chaotic. They are not harmonic or coherent. Again, that's because we're steeped in a culture of massive distraction.
So when we have this knowledge, I'm not sure you got all of this knowledge at this first year, because like you said, it's a continual process of learning for you. Where did you take this? Because I don't want to say your age, I don't know it, but you're not in your mid-20s anymore. So how did you, oh, I think we just lost George.
Do you still have my audio?
We still have your audio, but we lost your picture.
Hang on, I'm going to jump back in here, hopefully.
Okay.
We can still hear you.
Yeah. So ask me the question again, if you would, please.
So I'm trying to get from that first experience to all the knowledge you know now, and what was the path you took from there to here, to get you into all that you know now. I know they taught us a lot, and those of us that keep studying this mindful practice,
yes.
And we talk about it all the time, this brain work, this neuro pathway, this training your brain for positivity, because if we're having these massive thoughts and we're only cognitive to X amount of them, what we are cognitive goes through a team of filters, and I've been very diligent the past 6 years of putting the filters to weed out the chaos that you talked about, and only letting in, or only being consciously aware, mindful, presently aware of the ones I choose to help myself conscious. But anyway, take us from your first experience in your 20s to what you know now. What was the middle part of that path for you?
All right, now I'm back in the Hangout.
You are.
Yeah. So you can blue box me or whatever it is to get my mug up
now, but go ahead. I've got you. You're there.
The middle part. Actually, with permission, I'm going to quote from an author who's had a great impact on me that will really serve as the foundation for that answer. And it's from Daniel Odier, his book, Desire, the Tantric Path to Awakening. In attempting as often as possible to be present to reality, we will make contact with this reality at certain times and miss it at others. Little by little, we will taste things in the depth of presence and in the silence of the mind. From living in this space of freedom, a few seconds here, a few seconds there, our whole body-mind will turn more and more spontaneously toward presence, simply because it will discover that nothing brings it deeper satisfaction or deeper pleasure. So the middle part of my journey was once I had a taste of this depth of presence. And along with my depth of presence, the depth of understanding and claiming my purpose, my greater purpose. My journey began with sitting with mindfully all of those aspects of myself that were not in alignment with my greater purpose, that were not in alignment with what I truly love, what I'm on fire about. That's the work. That's the work that we will pursue through our entire lives, is transforming our inner arguments, our doubts, our fears, our unconscious investments in limit. As soon as we stretch forward into our dream or into adopting a new behavior or new trait, or let's say, you know, I've decided I'm going to write my book. As soon as I start writing, we're wired for familiarity. That's how we learn, but it's that familiarity wiring in our brains that says, no, wait, this is not the familiar, this is something else. And so literally our neurophysiology will manifest resistance. How we master our own resistance, how we master the dark side of our ability to learn, is to master and harness the bright and the light side, which is how we learn, how we grow, how we establish sustainable change, is through making a massive commitment. There was an HOA I was on last night. Kristen Drysdale, if you're on, please throw that link up. The gentleman who was doing the HOA was talking about our addiction to yes, our addiction to saying yes but not meaning it, or saying yes and not following through. How we create sustainable change is to make a massive commitment, not only to say yes, but to establish and create a strategy for staying in integrity with our yes. And then, because we're human, because we've got this wiring of familiarity that says, no, stay the same, don't change, how we master ourselves and master sustainable change is by committing and recommitting over and over and over from a space of mindfulness, rather than judging ourselves when we're completely human and we fall back into a habit. We simply remember our purpose and our reason and our commitment, and we recommit from a space of mindfulness and joy. That's been my process from the first taste of presence that I had in my warrior training, which we affectionately called the ego meat grinder.
That's funny. Yeah, one of my true mentors is Jeff Olson, and the slide edge philosophy of the only way you can make change to the sustainable, to use that term, is, you know, the little daily actions that you do every day. And if that's your practice, you know, once you've discovered your purpose, which many of us haven't, some of us have, many of us haven't, but once you discover your purpose, to then wake up every day with the purpose of living that true passion, and the daily activities repeated over and over, consistently, persistently, long period of time, is what makes those sustainable changes. So we've got about 6 minutes left, George. We've talked a lot about your path, and a lot about what you've learned, but where are you going now with it? As far as where are you going now with it? Because we've kind of understood, you know, what you've learned, but we didn't. How did you get there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, when we taste the freedom and liberation of really living fully in the moment, and when we practice that, it's a practice in traveling light. You can't hang on to the past and embrace the present. You know, if your hands are gripping the past, or your arms are locked around the past, you cannot embrace this moment. So I believe one of the first processes we did was a visualization where, with you, Tracy, I had you put some aspects of your past in a rearview mirror and have you just stand on the gas and drive forward. That's a great metaphor. And so how I got there, where I'm going now, what I'm doing right now is I have had the benefit of learning from elders who were born into this Lakota way of spirit, where they were born into a world where they lived with one foot firmly planted in the spirit and one foot in the today world. And in that consciousness, in that beingness, there was no differentiation. There was no compartmentalization. There was no left or right or black or white. There simply was the experience of living and breathing. So I use that as a model. I use the model of being trained as a warrior, of being trained as a spiritual intercessor for peace, what the Buddhas or the Buddhists call the Bodhisattva. And because I had these models, my father and my mother as models of people who embodied civility, hard work. My parents were children of the Depression. My father's model of being so mindfully present to other people that he naturally came from a space of compassion and understanding rather than judgment and reaction. And there's an enthusiasm that we experience when we taste the depth of enrichment of the moment of presence. And in that enthusiasm, we as human beings often want to share. And rather than being an evangelist, my commitment, my training, my models were be an example. And so, as you said in the beginning of the show, that the thing that impressed you first was the energy and the tone of my voice, perhaps. Part of being present in the moment allows you to empower the space you hold, to empower the words that you choose to share. And this is the power of presence. This is why I've decided and have made my commitment to train and mentor people in this adventure of mindfulness, is because the more present we are in the moment, the more present we are to ourselves, what I call the beloved, our heart, our primary and essential relationship with self, God, and the beloved, which represents for me my feminine spirit. That's the partnership, the ultimate partnership we enter into. When we refocus our attention on what truly matters most, the enrichment begins on the inner, but through our being, we are able to affect massive changes on the outer world. First from our being, and then from our way of relating from presence and mindfulness. So I've been inspired, and for more than 10 years in one form or another, I have offered up the opportunity to partner and play with me. I say play rather than work, and that's how I explained it to you, is we're joining each other on a new playground where we operate and play outside of the old paradigm of right and wrong, of judgment, of pass or fail grade. And my desire here is, originally 10 years ago, I was marketing these services to the New Thought, New Age community, and that I thought was the low-hanging fruit. But the reality is the New Thought, New Age community is just glutted with so many choices. The people who need and require and can benefit the most are the people who need it the most, and those are the mainstream corporate people. And concurrently, what we're finding is that mindfulness training is being adopted by major corporations and governments and just large organizations of all brands, because they're seeing the results that it manifests in nets. So, I train people one-on-one. I'm developing a corporate training. And the training is identical. What you and I are doing is identical, but if you go to my webpage, you'll see one of my pages is the Mindfulness Advantage Training for Athletes. And as it turns out, the skill sets that are most desirable for athletes and champions are the same skill sets that a mindfulness practice generates. Hopefully that answered your question.
It did. And, you know, Kirsten, do you have, before I go into a goodbye, because unfortunately it's been a half an hour for us, do you have anything you want to add to the conversation?
I have been thinking about when people come with these, with a mindfulness like this, that they don't have an agenda in the situation, so they're more open to accept the opportunities that are put in front of them. And I think
Indeed.
that really, you know, when people can see the flow coming through them, then they can be more open, and you know, and the thoughts from the beginning of the conversation about, you know, leaving your, when you're in your training and you left your baggage at the doorway. I think, you know, if everyone could just leave everything aside and breathe and move forward in their day, they would be a lot happier.
Amen. And my effort upgrade is rather than if, when. Because if we look at the culture, at least in name and word, hopefully in action of G+, there's a lot of focus and accentuation on being authentic and engaging in authentic relationships and being present and curious about what matters most to you first, rather than why I'm here and, you know, what I choose to promote. One of the most powerful effects of our practicing mindfulness is our ability to truly listen and listen from our hearts. And this becomes a method for us not only to transform ourselves, but to be a transformational catalyst, because when we listen to someone else and give them the entirety of our attention and listen from our hearts, often those people feel heard for the first time. And not only do they feel heard for the first time, but because of the way we're listening mindfully, they find their voice. And over and over through practice and training other people to be warriors of mindfulness, I've had reflected back to me how potent and powerful that listening process is, where the people who were the listeners as they were sharing would start to weep because they saw how much they were valued by that person and how valuable that person's experience was of being seen and heard for the first time, and seen and heard in a way where they were cherished and understood rather than judged. So again, it's not about the doing, it's about the being, about being mindful, about being a listener, and how clearly coherent and harmonic those experiences become.
That's a fantastic call to action, and beautiful, Kirsten. Way to just sum up the whole conversation into being able to go into a situation, be it husband, wife, kid, business, partnership, any of it, with an awareness of open, and to, you know, check our bags at the door, as they say, and come in with a whole heart to listen and be heard. Fantastic conversation, and what a wonderful another 18th episode, or another episode 18 for Healthy You Today. We will be here next week, as we are every Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Mountain, all points around the globe. And everybody go circle up George. Find him at, tell us your website, George, because I don't want to get it wrong.
It's
No.
www.themindfulnessadvantage.com. And just a heads up to everybody, circle me up, but my contact information is on my profile. Anyone who is curious enough to know more about how they can harness the power of now and mindfulness and transform their lives, it's someone I desire to talk to. So the invitation is to call me and schedule an introductory call, send me an email. Let's engage in any kind of conversation that is essential and feeds your heart and gets you closer to what matters most to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and George, a really special hug across the state line up there, because he's just above me in Colorado, for popping in today and helping us. Like you said, everything happens for a purpose, and I think your message needed to be heard today for a lot of people. So blessings to everybody, and we'll close out episode 18 of Healthy You, What's Your Path. See you next week.